Dobro večer, dragi gledatelji. Moj večerašnji gost više od 10 godina rade u Europskom parlamentu. Bio je savjetnik irskog premijera, a danas je ravnatelj odnosa s javnošću EJA, to jest Europske židovske asocijacije. I ja pozdravljam u studiju Aleksa Benjamina.
Hello, good evening.
Dobro večer, dobrodošli. Hvala vam lijepo na vašem vremenu. Razgovarat ćemo naravno ove tri teme. Irska, Europa i pozicija Židova u današnjoj Europi. Krenut ćemo od posljednje teme, budući da vi odmah u siječnju pripremate na veliki skup u Auschwitzu. Oko 100-tinjak parlamentaraca, između ostaloga i hrvatski naši parlamentarci bit će tamo prisutni, posredstvom premijera i inih ljudi u vladi, a i u parlamentu. Evo, ja sam tu nešto malo posredovao, poslaće se i hrvatske predstavnike, no kažite mi koja je svrha tog skupa u Auschwitzu?
Okay, so the point of the meeting in Auschwitz is basically because Europe right now is going through a real crisis when it comes to anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is rising across the board. It doesn't matter which country you're in, there is a rise in anti-Semitic activity. Some of that is coming from the left via anti-Zionism as a new anti-Semitism. Some of it's coming from the right as nationalism is re-emerging. And you hear politicians talking all the time. They say, never again. And no, this can never happen again. And Europe isn't Europe without the Jews. And yet, the situation keeps getting worse and worse year on year. So, we want to do something about it. And we think a good step is via education. So we wanted to bring 100 parliamentarians from across Europe, Croatia included, and we want them to recommit to combating anti-Semitism through educational programs, but also through other means, via government initiatives, etc., just to ensure that as we approach, it's actually the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, so it's a good time to go. And we're saying for the memory of those that were murdered, it's now becoming, there are less and less people who are alive, Holocaust survivors who are alive. It seems to us that it's the right time for Europe to really say, this is enough now. We've said never again, but it should also be not on my watch. And it should also be for the future. Let's make sure that the kids understand the contribution made by Jews to European ethics, to European medicine, to European agriculture, to the whole thing. Right now, if you ask, I don't know, if you ask your average Croatian school kid what they know about Jews, the chances are they'll just say, oh, they were the ones that died in Auschwitz, or they were murdered. That's the entirety of most people's understanding of Judaism, the Holocaust. And we're saying that that's not good enough. And then there needs to be much more of an effort to not only learn the lessons of the Holocaust, which is obviously extremely important, but to move beyond it and reflect in national curriculums, in society as a whole, the role that Jews play in the country today, tomorrow, and in the next generation.
Vidio sam danas jednu vijest iz Yad Vashema i vidio sam jednu onako lateralnu vijest. Jedan biznismen, jedan gospodin iz Švicarske, kupio je sve te memorabilije vezane uz Adolfa Hitlera, da ih ne bi pronacistički fanovi pokupovali. Čuo sam da se dešava i ispred Auschwitza prodaje upravo takovih pronacističkih i nacističkih parafernalija. Je li to moguće?
I don't know about if it's possible in front of Auschwitz. It's not something that I've seen. If that is the case, then it's clearly disgusting, and that shouldn't happen. The case that you just talked about, I actually met the Lebanese businessman a week and a half ago in Geneva, a guy called Abdallah Chatila, an amazing guy, amazing guy. We raised a story in the news about this sale at Hermann Historica, which is an auction house in Munich of all places. And anyway, we were just saying, listen, it's crazy. You know, we understand that some documents have historical value. For instance, I don't know, the signing of various treaties or the Ribbentrop Pact, or these various things might be interesting. But Eva Braun's cosmetics or Adolf Hitler's top hat, I mean,
Jeste li vi primijetili taj proces trivializacije nacizma koji se kroz europsku štampu, europski tisak posljednjih godina provlači? Kako je Hitler odgajao pse, kakvu je kozmetiku imala Eva Braun i slično. Na neki način se nacizam pokušava banalizirati, a svjesno ili nesvjesno time se jednostavno prezentira prihvatljivim.
You know, I couldn't have put it better. It's that kind of banalization, the guy at the auction house himself said, Hitler sells. And you can turn on, you know, I was sitting in the hotel earlier on, and 9 times out of 10, if you turn on National Geographic or the History Channel, you're going to see something about Hitler. And you'll find out little bits of trivia and, you know...
Od Daily Maila do hrvatske štampe vi ćete naći svaki tjedan nešto takvog.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does trivialize it, but it also normalizes it as well. Instead of this act being spoken about, I mean, it's kind of like, I can't imagine that Anders Breivik or Osama bin Laden or some of the worst murderers in recent times would be spoken about in such trivial, banal terms. And that's the worry. And people watching it at home are kind of like, well, this is okay, you know, I mean, you know, maybe he was misunderstood and we don't really know, and they go into this kind of narrative, and it's very dangerous.
Ja, i Osama volio takve parfeme, pa...
Right.
Spomenuli ste anticionizam i ove antisemitizme s lijeva i desna. O kojem antisemitizmu govorimo kad danas govori o antisemitizmu? Da li nekom starom, o novom? Ljudi misle obično izazvan migracijama, pa je reakcija na islam. No, imao sam ovdje u gostima rabi Menehama Margolina, on me upozorio da to nije tako, da perenira stalno jedan stari antisemitizam. Sad vi govorite o ovom lijevom i desnom, o anticionizmu kao antisemitizmu. Malo nam to objasnite.
Sure. So basically what we're facing right now in Europe is a perfect storm of anti-Semitism. So you've got what I call like the sort of American Deep South style of anti-Semitism, which has always been around. It's very, very old, and it's very, very prevalent. It's particularly prevalent in a lot of the countries of the East. It's based on stereotypes. It's based on the teachings of the Catholic Church as well, where up until 1965, I believe, they talked about the perfidious Judea in their prayers, and this sort of notion of Christ killing and the blood libels, all of this kind of thing. So you've met that, which has seen a resurgence as the migration crisis has come in, as nationalism has re-emerged. But then equally on the left, with these new migrants, the left are looking for votes. And a lot of the votes coming on the left.
Cynično.
Well, indeed, and a lot of these votes coming from the left are coming from people that have come from Arab countries that have been inculcated from the cradle to the grave with a hatred of anything Jews, and particularly what they really hate. What they hate more than anything. I notice, sir, you're wearing a white shirt. So imagine for a minute that white shirt represents the entirety of the Muslim world. Israel is a little wine stain on it, and try as they might, they can't get rid of that stain. Now, for me, it's a beautiful thing. I'm not going to say Israel is a stain, but in their minds, they regard it as a stain. So they try and scrub it, and they try and get rid of it, and no matter what they do, it's there. And anti-Zionism for them is everything that's wrong with the Jews, with the Western world. And so you've got this perfect storm of nationalism, which meets left-wing anti-Zionism, and then somehow meets in the middle. And strangely, you have the left and the right, and they make very, very strange bedfellows in coming forward with legislation that impacts Jewish people. So yeah, I mean, Labour in the UK is a classic example of anti-Zionism becoming a new anti-Semitism.
Svakako. U kojoj mjeri se Židovi danas iseljavaju iz Europe? Recimo, poznati slučaj rabina Barcelone, koji je u jednom trenutku uzviknuo "This place is lost." Ovo mjesto je izgubljeno. Znam da se Židovi dosta često iseljavaju u pravcu Majamija, u Izrael. No koliko je taj fenomen prisutan, ta pojava prisutna?
It's present. I mean, in France, for instance, which has a big problem with anti-Semitism, primarily from the left, as we were talking about. I mean, just going back to the Gilets jaunes briefly, just to give you an example of what we're talking about. There was a famous Jewish philosopher who was stopped in the street, a guy called Alan Finkielkraut.
On je vrlo poznat u Hrvatskoj, jer je bio na hrvatskoj strani tokom Domovinskog rata. Pokušava objasniti Europi šta se ovdje zbiva iz hrvatske perspektive.
So he was stopped outside of his house by some protesters, and instead of calling him a dirty Jew, which is punishable under French law, they called him a dirty Zionist. And the message was clear, that you can call somebody a dirty Zionist with impunity, but you can't call somebody a dirty Jew anymore. So anyway, France is extremely problematic, and it's seen one of the highest levels of what we call aliyah, aliyah being the Jewish word for actually emigrating to Israel, but a lot of them end up coming back. For us, it's a dangerous thing. We don't like to see Jews leaving Europe because it's just not a good thing. Europe has been a home to the Jewish people for thousands of years. And for Jews to leave, that really is flying the white flag and saying, as the rabbi in Barcelona said, this place is lost. Now, I still think that it isn't quite lost, and we have to work to ensure that it isn't lost. So, I mean, I was born in... a couple of generations ago, my family were from Romania. There's a pogrom in Romania. They ended up in London. I was born in London. I lived there for a number of years. Now I live in Belgium. This is the Jewish story. We move around Europe, and we're part of Europe, and Europe is part of us. So it's a shame for me to think that I should go to Israel. I love Israel. It's my insurance policy. If things ever got serious, that I can really move to Israel, and I'll be accepted tomorrow. I can live as a citizen. I can bring my family. But I still like to think there's hope for Europe.
Da, to je veliki gubitak za Europu, jer zapravo europski identitet nezamisliv bez prinosa i nasljeđa koje su ostavili Židovi tijekom stoljeća u Hrvatskoj, naročito od vremena industrializacije moderne. Kako je pak sa europskom desnicom? Vi ste govoreći o pojavi europske desnice, pa i sad ste upotrebili ovu frazu the perfect storm of immigration. Recite mi, je li zaista situacija tako kritična da se mora upotrijebiti ta fraza koja na hrvatskom označava ekstremno lošu situaciju? I hoće li ekstremna desnica, recimo Marine Le Pen ili AfD, rasti na valu tog migrantskog pritiska?
Okay, so I use that, I use the expression perfect storm, not to be alarmist, but that's exactly what it is.
Ne, to ne koristite samo vi. Vrlo česti izraze postaju naprosto tehnički termin.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a technical term. It's literally the meeting of two extreme weather fronts that, when they combine, create the worst storm that one can imagine. And yes, that's the worst situation that we find ourselves in today. And there's a lack of initiative on the part of most mainstream European political parties, and you talked about the AfD in Germany. The AfD in Germany didn't come out of nowhere. They came because there was a problem with migration in Germany. It's primarily a hangover from East Germany versus West Germany. There are any number of factors. And yes, it's alarming. But what is more alarming is that a lot of these parties are now trying to become our friends of the Jewish people. I can tell you that in the European Parliament, where I used to work for a number of years, and I still go into as on a daily basis as part of my work, one of Marine Le Pen's chief of staffs came up to me and said, you know, it'd be really nice. Marine is very, very keen to meet with Jewish leaders and heads of Jewish organizations in Europe. And I thought about it for a minute, and the first question that came to my head was, why? And his answer, and I still remember it clearly, his answer to me was, because my enemy's enemy is my friend.
Oh.
And that, to me, is the danger in this. Because, of course, a lot of Jews will think, well, you know, these guys are going after the Muslims, and maybe if they're after the Muslims, they're not after us.
Onda ćemo, znate, prvo su došli po jedne, pa su... Znate kako to ide, pogotovo kao Židov.
Recite,
vi ste govorili o neuspjehu zapravo pokušanje stvaranja, to jest krivotvorenja, forging ste upotrijebili, koherentnog europskog identiteta. Ajmo tu vašu tezu razložiti. Na koji ste koherentni europski identitet mislili i zašto mislite da se krivotvori i u čemu je neuspio?
Okay, so I know I'm in Croatia, so I better be careful what I say, but what I was going to say was, in many respects, for a lot of Jewish people and a lot of Jewish writers and a lot of the best period in our history in Europe was under the Habsburg monarchy. Okay?
Da vam nešto kažem prije toga. U Hrvatskoj, znam da vi se dobro pripremate, ima 80% nominalno katolika, ali ne morate zbog toga biti toliko oprezni. Ovdje je situacija jako sekularna i možete pričati što god vam padne na pamet.
Okay, that's good to know. So this was a time when you had some amazing writers and you had some amazing Jewish thought, and Jews really came out of a small village mentality and became part of, if you like, Main Street culture. I'm thinking of writers like Stefan Zweig, or I'm thinking of Joseph Roth, and I'm thinking about the whole Viennese school, and you know, people like Herzl. Mm-hmm. And Herzl was Viennese, as far as I'm aware, or Austrian. And that was a kind of golden age. And then nationalism started rising again in Europe. And then we saw what happened within the space of a couple of decades. All of the Jewish writers and all of the Jewish thinkers and all the great contributions to society, they had to leave. They had to leave. And after the Second World War, after the ashes, literally the ashes, when we're talking about Auschwitz and the concentration camps across Europe, Europe came into being, the European Union, and sometimes they say that history is endlessly repeating itself. And one has to wonder, given the history and given the opportunity that Europe had to build something, how we're ending up in a situation today where Jews are in the front line again. Where in the space of a few decades, from the 1950s, where it was a steel and coal community, going through to the Treaty of Rome, to Charter of Fundamental Rights, to this great sort of pan-European idea, which harked back to this sort of idea of the Habsburgian sense of Europe, if you like. And now we're into this sort of retreating back into... There was, if I may, there's another writer, he wasn't a Jew, he was called Musil, and he spoke about, well, I'm sure you know Musil, and he spoke about Europe being like a big mansion. And he said you used to be able to go freely from one room to another room, and you'd be welcome in the living room, and then you could go to another room and you'd be welcome there. And then he said, towards the end of the Habsburg Empire, that you couldn't travel from one room to another. People started barricading the doors, going, no, this is my room. I don't want anyone else in my room, this is my room. And this is what worries me about Europe today. That's why I think it's a missed opportunity, and that's where I see the danger. This sense of closing doors and not understanding the tremendous opportunity that exists with the European Union. I have to say, I'm anti-euro. I believe a European currency is a horrific, horrible idea, should never have been implemented in economic terms. But the idea of Europe, the idea of taking the sting out of some of this nationalism which has plagued this continent for so many years, that to me is a good thing.
Zanimljivo je, spominjete nekoliko puta Habsburge, oni su još davnih dana imali tu Reichsidee koja je rješavala pitanje nacionalnosti u zajedničkoj državi koja je bila etnički gledano zaista šarolika. I bez obzira koliko se, recimo, i mi Hrvati bunili, dosta dobro se rješavalo to nacionalno pitanje, ali pogotovo usporedi sa 20. stoljećem. Ali i jedni i drugi su nezadovoljni. Danas bi, recimo, iz te perspektive se kazalo da europskom identitetu nedostaju kršćanski korijeni, a vi ipak tvrdite, evo, Židovi se pokušavaju potpuno isključiti iz tog europskog identiteta. Je li onda to možda problem da se religijski jednostavno ne želi sagledati ta uzajamnost, neki sinkretizam u Europi danas, da se ona izvodi iz jednog posvemašnjeg sekulariteta?
Yes, again, very, very perceptive. Religion now in Europe is almost seen as a dirty word. And as a result of that, people have a very tribal affiliation with religion. Jews have always been, really, have always been an open people. And it's very sad today that the synagogue where I go to on a Saturday, in order to go inside, I have to pass a security cordon, and then I go through a police and the army and whatever. And people looking from the outside, that's all they see when they see Judaism. They see security, police, whatever. They don't see the joy of what goes on inside the synagogue. They don't see the prayer. They don't see people clapping, enjoying and laughing and family and all of that. They don't see any of that. And I'm sure it's the same in Christian churches, and I'm sure it's the same in Islam. What you are seeing today in Europe is a real battle between non-religious people and religious people. Now, I don't wear a kippah, but I believe in God, and my religion is extremely important to me. And one of the biggest, funnily enough, sir, one of the biggest problems that we face in Europe, we can deal with the right because we know our enemy, and we know what the enemy is on the right. We can deal with the left because we know what the enemy is on the left. What we find really problematic, and tomorrow I'm flying to Copenhagen, and just to give you an example, Copenhagen, Sweden, Norway, these are countries, progressive countries. These are countries with a strong liberal tendency, and they're by and large countries that are not really known for their religiosity. But they're also countries which are coming forward with some of the most discriminatory legislation against Jews. Now, we're not talking about they're deliberately targeting Jews in the way that the right or the left would be, but what they're doing is they're saying that children's rights come ahead of circumcision, or religious slaughter comes secondary to the rights of the animal. So we're seeing this erosion, and there's a pillar of European thought which is freedom of religion. And Jews have lived in Europe for a couple of thousand years, and we slaughter animals a certain way, and it's a deal breaker for us not to be able to circumcise our children after they're 8 days old. This is a biblical commandment. It's something that we take very seriously, and in fact a child can't be properly recognised as Jewish unless they've been circumcised. And in fact, if you were wanting to convert to Judaism today, and I know some of your viewers might wince at this thought, any male viewer who was thinking about converting to Judaism would have to go through a process of circumcision.
Don't say.
But the serious point in all of this is that we're seeing that erosion. We're seeing the fact that somehow, somewhere is deciding. Now, obviously, you're familiar with George Orwell, Animal Farm. And what happened, you ended up with this situation where obviously the pigs took over the farm, and then it was all animals are created equal. And then slowly and surely they woke up one morning and they saw all animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than the others. And this is a situation we're finding ourselves in Europe today when it comes to progressive forces. They're trying to make themselves more equal than the others and trying to belittle my faith, my practices, and the things that I hold dear. And that, to me, is almost a bigger threat than from the left and the right.
Kakvu vrstu obrazovanja vi predlažete kao sredstvo borbi protiv antisemitizma, ali ne samo to, kao sredstvo razumijevanja da to što vi tražite kao naprosto poštovanje temeljnih vjerskih prava nije nikako sedmo svjetsko čudo. Evo, uspoređujete prava životinja, pa nije valjda došlo do toga da vi kao Židovi imate manje prava. Mislim, ja sam inače aktivist u borbi za prava životinja, ali bi mi bilo svakako jako ružno čuti da se vi osjećate u Europi danas kao manje privilegiran u odnosu na psa ili mačku.
Okay, well, I can just say, first of all, I'm a huge fan of animal rights as well. I think it's very, very important. But there's a narrative which has been created that somehow the way of kosher slaughter is somehow bad, and that's not the case. I mean, if I've been to abattoirs and I've seen the way modern mechanical slaughter happens, and I can assure you that the way that the shochet, the guy who's trained to do it in a Jewish way, causes much less suffering to the animal than the conveyor belt where the animals are literally, excuse my language, shitting themselves before they go in because they can smell the death and the animal in front is being strung up. This doesn't exist in Judaism. And Judaism is very much all not about the suffering of people, not about the suffering of animals. So we end up with a lot of these kind of misnomers and a sort of narrative that somehow it's cruel. And it's genuinely not the case.
Rekli smo da ćemo iskoristiti činjenicu da ste Irac koji je, eto, radio za kojeg premijera?
I was actually the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, David Trimblea, during the peace process.
I to u vrlo važnom trenutku ste bili za Veliki petak tada. Da, u trenutku tog sporazuma.
So I came in after I was working in an advertising agency at the time, and I just happened to be living in the same home as David Trimblea's press secretary. And literally a couple of days after the Good Friday Agreement was signed, I felt very positive about it, and I wanted to do something about it. And I felt that the unionist side of things was very much what I believed in. And there was an opportunity, and I went, and I became the press guy for not only for the Prime Minister, but for the party as a whole in Northern Ireland, which was an incredible time.
Sa tim iskustvom, kasnije ste bili 10 godina i više u Briselu, recite mi kako vi vidite danas proces Brexita iz perspektive Irca?
From an Irish perspective.
To je po prvi puta da u Hrvatskoj, ja ne znam da je ikada itko doveo sam jednog ekonomista iz londonskog Cityja da govori iz ekonomske perspektive o Brexitu, ali sada po prvi put Irac koji govori o Brexitu.
Okay, so I can tell you that, yes, I'm actually from Northern Ireland.
Don't say
so, but I can tell you...
Niko nije savršen.
Indeed. But in terms of, I mean, it's a national embarrassment. The way it's horrific. It's like, sometimes I like to watch boxing. And initially it was quite funny, and again, using another analogy, it was kind of mildly amusing at the beginning. It was a bit like when Trump first got elected. You sort of go, that's Trump. Oh, he's doing crazy stuff. That's kind of funny. And then a couple of years later, or three or 4 years later, it becomes tiring. And Brexit has been like watching the British public fight each other. And in a boxing match, it's only nice to watch a boxing match when it doesn't go on too long. When it's in the 12th round and both guys are blooded and battered and they're dripping with sweat and it's just hideous and both sides want to throw in the towel and you just after a while you just don't want to look anymore. And that's how I feel about Brexit.
Ja mislim da još gore. Da u ovom susretu protivnici promašuju jedan drugoga, tako da je potpuno besmisleno. Ali recite vi meni, bez obzira iz koje ste Irske, kako vidite tu situaciju, taj issue, te irske granice?
Okay, it's extremely complex and it's a difficult issue. I can tell you that my mother lives a stone's throw away from the Irish border. Literally, I mean, from my mother's front garden to the Irish border, you could pick up a stone and throw it across. And in the old days, you used to have to go across border. And the border is very much an identity. Borders tend to be identities, they're a way of holding people in or whatever. And the beauty of the Good Friday Agreement and the beauty of the EU relationship between the United Kingdom and Ireland was that it was easier for my mum to go to the village in the Irish Republic to do her shopping than it was to go to the village in the north. And that's a very simple, trivial matter.
Je li to relaksiralo odnose između ljudi, protestanata i katolika?
No question about it, because it was like taking an eraser across the border, which meant that the Protestant side was comfortable because they remained in the United Kingdom. The Irish side felt that somehow there was almost some kind of territorial integrity across the island as a whole. And then when you start talking about putting that border back in, Because the problem with putting that border back in is it needs to be policed, and it needs army, and it needs all kinds of people. And what the Good Friday Agreement did and what the peace process did was you removed all of that security apparatus, and you took away the watchtowers, and you took away all of that, and you did away with it. And if you start doing that again and you start putting it on the border, it's like, in English we say picking the scab off a wound. So it's healed, and then you pull it open and let it start bleeding again. Why would we want to do that? So it's a complicated situation. They're trying to find ways around it. I'm not sure that there is any real... The entire peace process was, we call it a fudge anyway. It enabled both sides to feel that they got a victory. Creative ambiguity, I think they called it. And I think when it comes to the Irish border, you're going to need a solution that comes up with more creative ambiguity. Because if you start putting soldiers and police back on that border...
Mislite li da bi ta situacija mogla eskalirati opet u nekakvu nasilnu situaciju?
I think it could very, very quickly, because nobody really foresaw. Yeah, I think it could happen relatively quickly. You have still, in some pockets along the border, you have people who are ready to go to war again, people that haven't really accepted the fact that the peace process, they wanted all or nothing. And then you have people on the Protestant side who, if that situation arose again and people started being killed or people were taking shots again or shooting at the security forces, they would come. And then very, very quickly, it doesn't take much to get that fire started again.
Kako biste vi opisali ovu činjenicu koju danas imamo da je zapravo Sjeverna Irska na neki način konzervativnija od Republike? Recimo, da se smijuljite pitanje pobačaja, ovdje je premijer, da sve vam je jasno što vas hoću pitati, izvolite.
I completely get where you're coming to. And the funny thing is,
Premier.
Yeah, he's a Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, who comes from Indian descent, who's gay. Ireland, the Republic of Ireland recently passed into legislation legalizing abortion and first, I think, same-sex marriages. A very, very open, tolerant society. And I remember in our old headquarters in the Unions building, we had these posters, and the posters were, I suppose, similar to some of the propaganda you might have seen during the Soviet era. And it was a woman in sort of shining white robes saying, don't go over to the other side of the border, it's dark and it's, you know, it's full of sort of Catholic backwardness and all of this kind of thing. And
kao u skeču Monty Pythona.
Right.
Ako ga se sjećate.
I don't, but a lot of Northern Ireland politics is a lot like a Monty Python sketch. In fact, sometimes we say that Judaism is as well, because there are so many different Jewish organizations. We say it's like the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea.
Što su Rimljani napravili? Imam tu majicu.
Yeah, what did the Romans ever do for us? Anyway, indeed. So, and now the roles have completely switched. So now the South, which for years was under, if I can say this, was under a very strong influence by the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church, as you know, in many other countries in Europe, has gone through a bit of a crisis over all kinds of crises that I don't really want to go into, but they had all kinds of crises. And as a result, they lost a lot of their power, and a lot of progressive voices starting to come through. So that enabled the South to become a lot more open and a lot more, if you like, liberal. And the North, because it's very grounded in Protestantism and a certain type of Protestantism, I'm sure a lot of your viewers know Ian Paisley and that kind of free Presbyterian kind of Protestantism, has remained very, very conservative. So the roles have completely flipped in the most unexpected way.
Da, kako se to mijenja. Ali vidite, Hrvati su jako zainteresirani za tu takovu liberaliziranu Irsku. Recite mi, ipak sad bez obzira na razliku odakle ste, ali imate dobar pogled, koja je tajna tog irskog čuda? Da u kratko vrijeme i ekonomski, ali evo i društveno i kulturalno, sasvim jedna nova situacija.
Okay. It's a good question. I can give you a sense of it. I mean, my brother, for instance, lives in the Irish Republic along with his children. They went through a very, very tough time. They went through a crisis similar, not as bad economically, but similar to the Greek crisis. In fact, my brother's house that he had a mortgage on for a few years, it was worth less than the mortgage he was paying. I mean, I'm sure but the Irish model was built in a successful way on policies on the Irish government side to make taxes lower for big corporations to come in. So you've got Apple and Google and these kind of, which created a hub. Also, there was a move away from the very small agrarian type of society. And Irish people learnt not only to make things, but they became involved in high tech. And there's a very entrepreneurial culture in Ireland.
Znači, država se minimizirala I prepustila je tržištu zapravo da se razvije.
Yes. A lot of people weren't necessarily happy with it. A lot of people on the left said, why are we giving these tax breaks to huge corporations? But there's a clear benefit in that with these big corporations come a lot of satellite jobs, and with those satellite jobs come other satellite jobs. So it sort of spreads out, and it had a positive effect. Although one has to say that, I can't speak for Croatia, but I would imagine it's something similar, but in the capital, a lot of the business is based, but if you go out into the countryside, things haven't changed all that much.
Ovdje je uspreda nemoguće, mi imamo jedan nacional komunizam, tako da se ne zavarete. Došli smo do Europske unije, 3 minute smo do kraja, pa samo mi kažete, kako vi vidite problem Europske unije iz Brisela, a preko 10 godina ste u administraciji, znate svakoga, tamo ko je nešto, I koje su perspektive Europske unije kakva je evo, na pomolu u sljedećih 50 godina?
Okay, wow, okay, in 3 minutes? Wow, that's a tough ask, but I'll do my best. Okay, so the problem is purely and simply decision making. It's very, very difficult. European Union as a whole is like a huge cruise ship. It's a magnificent thing to behold, and but try getting it to move quickly, and it's virtually impossible. And some of the challenges that Europe has faced in terms of economic challenges, in terms of political challenges, require quick thinking. And the problem is if you want to get a quick result, now try getting an agreement amongst 27 or 28 people in a room and get them to agree with unanimity. And this is the problem that you have in Europe. Everyone agrees or no one agrees. So you have some countries who'll say, no, that's not in my interest, and other countries. So that's a problem. And I tend to find in politics that people tend to gravitate towards the decision makers and the people that are going to make decisions quickly. Europe is imperfect in that regard, and it can't move necessarily as quickly as it wants to. The pace of legislation is like watching a snail race. It's painful, it's labyrinthine.
Kako je onda perspektiva tako Europske unije?
In what sense? Sorry?
Pa hoće li recimo postojati Europa dviju brzina, hoće li postojati nekakva sržna Europa, core Europe Union, sa ovom perifernom novom Europom, kako se planira? Ima raznih planova koji se sastavljaju na dvije Europe.
It depends, and I see where you're going with that, because it's actually a really, really important point to finish on. Particularly some newer countries like Croatia and Czech Republic, where my wife is from, and various other states. There's a danger in the two-speed Europe because you're effectively regarded as a second-class citizen. So what annoys me is a sort of Franco-German sort of arrogance that believes that it has to be driving the whole time and nobody else can drive. And if you do that, you've already started to see fissures appearing, people like Viktor Orban, the Visegrad 4, other countries. There's a danger in that. I think Europe, and there's a danger going back to what we were talking with Musil earlier on. If you start going down that road, people are going to start closing the doors again. And if Europe really is to be an open house, then everyone needs to move together and nobody gets left behind. We use an army analogy, and it's an important thing in the Israeli army. One of the mottos is nobody gets left behind. And I believe in European terms, nobody should be left behind. It hasn't got a very good track record when it comes to Greece, but everyone should move at the same speed and everyone should be, and I know that sounds like communism and it's really not meant to, but everyone should, all animals are created equal when it comes to the EU and they should be able to move forward as equals.
Hvala vam lijepo i lijepa poruka za kraj. Hvala puno na vašem vremenu.
It was my pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Hvala vam, dragi gledatelji, što ste bili sa nama. Gledajte nas naravno sljedećeg ponedjeljka. Do tada, doviđenja, laku noć.